Welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet. My name's Jonathan Lester. I'm the leader of the council, and so I'll be chairing this meeting. In addition to those councillors present in the room, we have other councillors joining our meeting remotely. So I'll now check that they can see us and hear us. Councillor Fagan, welcome to the meeting. Can you see and hear us?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. And we also have group leaders in attendance or their representatives, plus scrutiny chairs in attendance, as we've just checked with Councillor Fagan, but we also have other scrutiny chairs in the room, and officers are also joining us, and they will introduce themselves if they're called upon. So I'll now thank you to formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information of this meeting are available for public viewing on Herefordshire Council's website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on Herefordshire Council's YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Only one microphone should be used at any one time. If you have an issue with your microphone, then please let us know. Please ensure that mobile phones and all other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If any member of the public attending does not wish to be filmed or photographed, then please notify a member of staff. As we move through the agenda, in addition to the discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives to indicate if they wish to provide the views of their group and ask relevant questions. Where appropriate, if scrutiny chairs do wish to make a comment, then I will allow that also. So voting by Cabinet is a show of hands by those Cabinet members in the room. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. So have we received any apologies?
We received apologies from Councillor Hercombe.
Thank you very much. Are there any other apologies?
Councillor James.
Thank you, Councillor Tillett. Thank you very much. Right, okay. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interests. So for Cabinet, are there any Table A, Table B, or any other interests for items on the agenda today? No, thank you. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. No matters of accuracy have been received by the monitoring officer. So we have the Cabinet minutes for the 19th of December 2024. So I'd like to ask Cabinet, are you content that they are a correct record, and we're happy to approve those minutes? Yeah, all in agreement? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is to receive questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We have received 4 public questions for this meeting, and the response has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted questions have the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or attend the meeting and ask their supplementary question in person. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. So if we go to the first question from Mr. McKay, do we have a supplementary question?
We do. I'll just bring it up on screen.
Thank you.
So the first question from Mr. McKay is for the Cabinet Member for Roads and Regulatory Services. My question asked if you will add a section to the Rights of Way Improvement Plan covering the management policy for unsurfaced, unclassified roads without reply, such as an annual safety inspection, logging obstructions, etc. on the new road defect web page when it moves to the next stage, and if you have any prediction when that might be.
Thank you for that question, Mr. McKay. And Councillor Durkin.
Mr. McKay, thank you for your supplementary question as well as your original question. The Council's Rights of Way Improvement Plan covers the period to 2018 to 2028 and sets out the approach to inspection and maintenance. We will, of course, consider your suggestions as provided in your response when work is undertaken to produce the next plan. It's important to note that the Council's Highways Maintenance Plan also sets out the categories, frequencies and modes associated with undertaking safety inspections, including unsurfaced roads and unmetallized public rights of way. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And next question is from Mrs. Morietska, and it's, do we have a supplementary question?
Yes, we do. I'll just bring it up.
Thank you.
Again, this is for the Cabinet Member for Environment. If the Council has not yet agreed to this scale of the development to the west of the city, what are the criteria it is using to enable the 2025-26 capital investment budget to state that a new road in this area will result in the allocation of 37%, 10,000 houses, of the total mandatory housing target for the entire county to an area that is nationally scarce, high-grade agricultural land, a floodplain, and poses such a huge risk to over 3,000 existing jobs and the wider local economy, and flooding to the city of Hereford?
Thank you. And Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, and thank you, Mrs. Morietska, for her supplementary question. We are unable to confirm the specific number of houses that will be developed to the west of Hereford until options for allocation of the new mandatory housing targets are fully assessed and consulted upon through the local plan. We anticipate that a further Regulation 18 consultation will be undertaken later in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swinglehurst. The next question is from Carol Prothero. We have an answer to that that's been published. Do we have a supplementary question, please?
We do, for Cabinet Member for Transport and Infrastructure. Councillor Price says that no capital funding has been allocated to Pontrala Station as the business case needs to demonstrate a viable proposal supported by DfT and Network Rail. Please explain why the Council has applied different standards to the allocation of funding to the Portrilis and Southern Link Road schemes, given that neither have business cases demonstrating they are viable proposals supported by DfT and Network Rail.
Thank you for the question. And Councillor Price, please.
Yes, thank you, Carol Prothero, for your supplementary question. These schemes are not comparable as they are at very different stages of their development. The Hereford Western Bypass is at full business case stage, whereas a potential station at Pontrilis is only a strategic outline business case. Considering where a scheme is viable, regardless, a new station between Abergavenny and Hereford would be delivered by Network Rail and requires their agreement and funding as well as other third-party approvals, whereas the bypass is being delivered by the Council and within the Council's powers as the Highway Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. And finally, public questions. We have a supplementary question from Mr. Milne, who's here in the room. So, Mr. Milne, in your own time.
For the benefit of members of the public who may be following this, as there are a number of acronyms in this question, I'll unscramble them. That might take me a moment over the minute allowed. The response confirms that for the proposed Southern Link Road, we would be paying an additional £1.5 million a year on interest alone for another £30 million of borrowing. The response doesn't answer the question as to what revenue budget saving the Council thinks will be generated by the scheme in line with its rules requiring a payback on capital investments above £6.7 million. At the public inquiry, Herefordshire Council insisted that the Southern Link Road as part of the Southway Transport Package is a stand-alone project, not part of some larger bypass or housing access road, as is now being suggested. As such, the Council has been unable to deliver a full business case for it, nor, given its low benefit cost ratio, quote unquote, demonstrate that it represents value for money in its own right, unquote, as required by the outline strategic business case at item 8, Appendix E. How then does the Council propose to address this, and what services might be cut in future years to meet the additional revenue deficit if the scheme proceeds?
Thank you for your question, Mr Milne. And Councillor Stoddart?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr Milne, for your supplementary. The £6.7 million refers to the amount which is corporately funded. Any amounts above this level are considered as part of the revenue budget and the MTFS. This revenue budget and the MTFS reflect the proposed borrowing. And I can also confirm that there are no services which are planned to be cut. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddart. That concludes questions from members of the public. We now move on to agenda item 5, which is to receive any questions from councillors. We've received one question from Councillor Hitchener, and can I ask whether we've received a supplementary question, please?
We have, and it is for Councillor Stoddart. The supplementary question is, as far as I know, the Treasury Management Strategy is not set in stone and can be amended at a full council meeting. I accept that there is insufficient time between now and the date of the budget meeting on February the 7th, 2025, for proper consideration to be given to this issue. I therefore repeat my question, slightly amended. Will the Cabinet agree that full consideration should be given to the best way to protect this growing deposit, including the possibility of investing with a fund manager for incorporation, if appropriate, in the Treasury Management Strategy to be considered at the Council meeting in February 2026 and provide an appropriate report to members within the next 3 months. Keeping the money in cash and setting it off against borrowings may be helpful to the Council in the short term, but as members will be aware, as with Section 106 monies, is not a protection against inflation.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Hitchener. And Councillor Stoddart, please.
Thank you again, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Hitchener, for your supplementary. I can confirm that Cabinet will consider this proposal and we will provide appropriate information within the next 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. Next item on the agenda is the agenda item where we would normally discuss any reports from scrutiny committees. So we have three of the three scrutiny committee chairs present, one online and 2 in the room. But the Scrutiny Management Board meeting tomorrow is where they will be looking at the budget. But they're very welcome here today and really appreciate their attendance. And if there are any burning questions or queries that you have while you're sat there, I will use my discretion to allow any query if you think it would help the meeting. But as I say, because no report has yet gone, there's no report to cover in this item. So we will move swiftly on to agenda item 7, which is the draft budget for 2025-2026. So the council has a statutory responsibility to set a budget and council tax in advance of the new financial year. The 2025-26 revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy of the same year up until 2028-2029 will be recommended to council in February at the next meeting on the 7th, the next full council meeting on the 7th of February. So this agenda item begins on page 17 of the agenda pack, and I would like to ask Councillor Stoddart to provide his covering report and comments on this agenda item. Thank you. Over to Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you very much, Leader. In financial year 2024-25, Herefordshire Council received £6.9 million as part of the Rural Services Delivery Grant and £0.2 million in Services Grant, giving us a total of £7.1 million. The November 2024 policy statement confirmed the introduction of a £1.53 billion of new grant funding for local government across 3 priority grants: Recovery Fund of £600 million, a Social Care Grant of £680 million, and Children's Services Prevention Grant of £250 million, noting that these grants would be funded in part by the abolition of the Rural Services Delivery Grant of £110 million and the Services Grant of £87 million. The Rural Services Delivery Grant recognised the increased financial pressures in delivering services in a rural county. Herefordshire has the fourth lowest population density in England, with approximately 189,000 residents across 842 square miles. And as such, the council faces very specific challenges and additional costs in the delivery of our services to sparsely populated communities. Herefordshire Council is committed to ensuring that funding appropriately reflects rural needs and the additional cost pressures of service delivery and demand in rural areas in order to prevent further deepening of rural deprivation and inequalities. Through our S151 officer, we have provided responses to consultations on the provisional settlement and local authority funding reform, alongside collaboration and representation through the Rural Services Network, County Council Network and Society of County Treasurers, and we will also actively engage with the Fair Funding Review in March 2025. The provisional settlement announced by Central Government on the 19th of December 2024 duly confirmed the abolition of the Rural Services Delivery Grant and the Services Grant, and confirmed that Herefordshire would receive zero funds under the new Recovery Grant and a total of £369,000 under the new Children's Social Care Prevention Grant, providing us with a net loss of £6.766 million against the previous year. The redistribution of these grants, which would have been removed, have not been directed to the residents of Herefordshire. Analysis by the RSN shows that rural authorities only received £22.8 million, that is 3.8% of the total available, of the recovery grant, and most of these were Shire district councils. Of the upper tier councils, only two, Durham and Cumbria, received any payments, and these amounted to £15.3 million. No rural county council will receive any payments. Further review of government-funded spending power, which excludes council tax per head, highlights a significant gap in the position of rural counties compared with urban authorities, and following the provisional settlement, the gap between rural and urban councils has now increased to 41%. Herefordshire Council in 25-26, based on provisional allocations, expects to receive central government grant funding totalling £29.7 million, which represents a reduction of £2.5 million from the previous year, and that is shown in Table 2 of the report. The reduction in central government grants results in less funding per head than urban areas, despite the increased cost of service delivery to rural communities. To maintain services and deliver the best for our residents, the Council is therefore increasingly more reliant on funding through council tax than its urban counterparts. Furthermore, the removal of this funding places increased pressure on the Council to manage the impact of continuing growth in demand and cost for services. It also limits the Council's ability to build upon its strong financial position and maximise opportunities to deliver ambitious improvements for our residents. The proposed budget and strategy for 25-26 builds on the prudent approach and robust financial management exercised in 2024 and 25 and prior years to preserve and protect the Council's future financial resilience and sustainability at a time of increasing cost pressures, reduced central government grants, uncertainty over future funding arrangements, and planned reorganisation of the local government framework. As a result of the robust management of the revenue budget and responsible stewardship of the Council's financial resources, the Council is in a strong and resilient position to respond to and withstand future financial pressures. This strong financial position is evidenced through a balanced budget for 25-26, which includes realistic and achievable savings, adequate reserves to manage financial risks and respond to emerging pressures, positive cash flow and high levels of liquidity, a strong balance sheet with low levels of borrowing relative to the Council's asset base, an unqualified audit opinion on the financial statements for 23-24 published by the statutory deadline, and external assurance in respect of the Council's financial sustainability confirmed in the Auditor's annual report for 23-24 with no significant weaknesses identified. A sustainable financial strategy has therefore been developed for 25-26 and onwards to ensure the Council can achieve an ambitious programme of innovation and improvement to deliver the best for Herefordshire. The process to deliver a draft revenue budget commenced in the early summer, and over the last few months, officers and cabinet members have worked together to set a realistic budget for 25-26. In spite of the challenges and central government's reduction in grant funding, I am very pleased today to announce that following a titanic effort by both council officers and cabinet members, we have achieved a balanced budget for 2025-26. The provisional revenue budget that I will outline to you today will be subject to consultation with council members and the Council Scrutiny Management Board tomorrow, the 14th of January. This provisional revenue budget for 25-26 totals £232 million. Our MTFS showed a planned level of 3.99% increase in council tax, and until the preliminary settlement was issued on the 18th of December, that was our intention. However, due to the impact of central government's reduction in our preliminary settlement, we have therefore had to accept a 4.99% increase in council tax. The Provisional Local Government Financial Settlement for 2025-26, published on the 18th of December, confirmed the local authority allocation of redistributed grant funding across new priority grants. The Council's allocation of the redistributed grant funding for 2025-26 is shown in Table 1 of the report and clearly shows the loss of £6.766 million. Table 2 of the report shows a comparison of grant funding from 2023-24 to 25-26 and shows the reduction in grant funding from 24-25 to 25-26 is £2.5 million. I would now like to address council tax income. Council in February 2024 unanimously approved the implementation of council tax premiums for empty properties and second homes, in line with regulation and guidance issued by the Secretary of State. Total council tax income of £146.5 million in the 2025-26 draft revenue budget includes estimated income of £3.1 million in premiums which were applied to second homes and empty properties. This estimate is informed by the number of dwellings confirmed as second homes or empty dwellings and the duration of the property status as per billing data as at December 2024. A series of verification checks to confirm occupancy and ownership status has been undertaken during 2024-25 to provide assurance in respect of the value of this budgeted income. I can confirm that a range of compliance measures are in place and will remain under review during 2025-26 to ensure that council tax premiums are charged on all relevant dwellings. I would now like to address another income stream, namely business rates income. The total value of business rates due is collected by the council, paid to government, and then redistributed back to the council via a formula grant mechanism. Business rates income collected by the council is accounted for separately from the council's revenue budget in the collection fund. The council retains additional business rates income from the Hereford Enterprise Zone, or HEZ. The HEZ was designated by government as one of the 48 enterprise zones in 2012 designed to boost local growth and create jobs in specialist sectors including advanced manufacturing and engineering, agri-food, business services, construction including built environments and security. Any growth in business rates above an agreed baseline after reliefs and discounts within the enterprise zone over a 25-year period from April 2013 is retained by the Council to be reinvested locally. The 2025-26 revenue budget therefore includes additional business rate income retained from the HEZ of £1.3 million. Following confirmation of final amounts to be retained from business rates collected from the Hereford Enterprise Zone, any additional rate income retained above the budgeted income of £1.3 million will be transferred to earmarked reserves to be reinvested locally to support economic growth and redevelopment in future years. A programme of initiatives and activity to support growth in skills, business and tourism is currently being developed. Excuse me. If additional funding is confirmed in the final local government settlement, which we expect in late January or early February this year, then the value of additional business rates income applied to the revenue budget in 2025-26 will be subsequently reduced. Extended producer responsibility is a new central government grant that is outside of core spending power. The provisional settlement confirmed the allocation of £1.1 billion in income from the Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging scheme, which will be allocated to local authorities in 2025-26. The Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging regulation is part of the Environmental Act 2021 and requires businesses to take responsibility for the packaging they sell in the UK from the time it is placed on the market until it is disposed of. The government will assess the impact of additional PER income on the relative needs and resources of the individual local authorities and how it is factored into measurement of local authority spending power ahead of the 2026-27 settlement. Herefordshire Council's allocation is confirmed as £3.5 million, and this has been included in the total funding for 2025-26. Government is yet to announce the allocation of new burdens of funding for the collection of food waste from all households, which will be required in 2026-27. I'd now like to turn to inflation and national living wage increases. CPI inflation is expected to rise to 2.5% before falling back to the target rate of 2% by mid-2025. However, continuing geopolitical risks may have an impact on inflation rates in the short term. In the autumn budget, Government announced an increase in the national living wage for individuals aged 21 and over of 6.7% from the 1st of April 2025, going from £11.44 to £12.21 per hour, an increase of 16.3% in the national minimum wage for 18 to 21-year-olds and 18% for both under 18s and apprentices. The impact of the increase in the national living wage, employers' national insurance and movement in CPI inflation rate on the rates that the council pays for services under contract and in particular care contracts has been considered as part of this draft budget. Our revenue budget proposal for 2025-26 is summarised in a table at paragraph 40 with the detailed Directorate savings proposals detailed in Appendix B. Community and Wellbeing will see an increase in its base budget of £15.273 million. That's an additional 20% to a total of £91.164 million. Children and Young People includes additional funding for pressures in 25-26, but overall sees its budget reduce by £473,000 to a total of £59.063 million as a result of continued savings in the Directorate. Economy and Environment sees its base budget increase by £4 million, which is approximately 10% to £42.415 million. Corporate Services will see its base budget increase by £2.5 million or 8% to £22.852 million. And Central Services, which includes financial transactions, minimum revenue provisions and other corporate budget items, will see its base budget reduce by £1.4 million or 8% to £16.51 million. This leads to a proposed revenue budget of £231.995 million, an increase of 9% on the 2024-25 base budget. And this is funded by council tax at £146.45 million or 63%, business rates at £47.567 million or 20.5%. Social care grant support at 20.336 million or 9%. Extended producer responsibility grant at 3.538 million or 1.5%. And then the other smaller grants make up the remaining 13.9 million or 6%. Each directorate faces a number of unfunded pressures which total £27.6 million, but which have been factored into their base budgets for 2025-26. And these include pay award. This pressure represents an impact of the estimated pay award for 2025-26 on staffing expenditure across all directorates. National insurance, direct impact. This pressure represents the direct impact of increases in the rate and thresholds for employers' national insurance on the Council's pay bill. It is expected that this pressure will be funded by government, which will be confirmed in the final settlement, but the proposed draft budget includes estimated funding of £1.5 million. Inflation. This pressure represents the impact of inflation across contractual and non-contractual commitments in 2025-26. Inflation is estimated based on a variety of relevant inflation and price indices as well as contract-specific rates. And we fund that at 90% in this revenue budget as in previous financial years. In demand pressures reflect additional demand for services based on most recent activity, data and costs. This pressure includes adjustments to reflect trend analysis and planned transformational activity in each service area. Table 3 in the report shows the value of these pressures split by each directorate. To recognise and mitigate the risk to the revenue budget of excessive cost, pressures and volatility in demand across social care budgets, a contingency reserve of £11 million has been established in 2024-25 as approved by Cabinet in November 2024. This budget resilience reserve will remain under review during 2024-25 and 2025-26, and any future use of the reserve will be subject to appropriate governance in accordance with the Council's financial procedure rules and constitution. Paragraphs 43 to 45 of the report clearly details how community wellbeing will deal with all of these additional pressures. The detail of how children and young people will deal with the pressures is detailed in the report at paragraphs 46 to 63 and includes the ongoing work to deliver the Phase 2 improvement plan and its move from a 3-year to a 4-year financial plan. The budget includes £3.9 million of realistic and achievable savings in this directorate, following a refresh of the financial plan which supports the improvement journey. The Q2 budget monitoring report for 2024-25 shows that the Children and Young People's Directorate is forecasting to deliver a balanced position for 2024-25 with delivery of £2.3 million in savings. Unprecedented increases in the demand for children's social care, however, continue to have a significant impact on children's services nationally. Growing demand in early help, special educational needs and disability, and home-to-school transport and national challenges in the recruitment and retention of social care workers continues to contribute to pressures across the Directorate. I would now like to address the Dedicated Schools Grant. The cumulative DSG, or Dedicated Schools Grant deficit, is accounted for as an unusable reserve on the Council's balance sheet, as permitted by a statutory instrument which will remain in place until the 31st of March 2026. This enables all local authorities to ring-fence the DSG deficit from the overall financial position in its statutory accounts. It should be noted that this issue is a major concern amongst local authorities nationally. At the 1st of April 2024, the cumulative deficit brought forward to Herefordshire Council totals £6.1 million. The Q2 September 2024 forecast was an overspend of £7.6 million within the high need blocks of the DSG, increasing the cumulative deficit to £13.7 million by 31 March 2025. A focused review to quantify the impact of emerging demands in 2025-26 and future years is currently underway to inform the Council's DSG deficit management plan. It is expected that this will increase the forecasted deficit by 31st March 2025. The provisional settlement confirmed that government will set out plans for reforming the SEND system next year, including a decision on the statutory override. The Council continues to work with the Department for Education, Local Government Association and other local authorities to seek clarification on the position once the statutory instrument expires and a sustainable funding strategy for the high needs budget is derived. Now returning to the Economy and Environment Directorate, as detailed in paragraphs 66 to 77, investment in the Directorate will provide sufficient resource and capacity to support growth in the economy in 2025-26 and will deliver key projects through the capital programme. The Directorate will continue to implement a new operating model and contracting arrangements for public realm services and manage pressures in the operation of waste collection and disposable contracts arising due to the growth in the volume of domestic waste and inflationary increases in the contract sum. As part of budget setting activity, a review of the Development Planning Control income target for 2025-26 has been undertaken, considering historic performance against budget, expected growth and the impact of planned reform of the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPFF, and other changes to the planning system by government. For 2025-26, it is proposed that the Development Planning Control income budget is reduced by £1 million. This reset represents a revised income target which is both realistic and achievable, all whilst enabling the service to continue to identify efficiencies in service delivery and opportunities to maximise income generation. Additional funding in 2024-25 through the increase in Rural Services Grant at the final settlement was allocated in last year's revenue budget to provide additional funding for drainage works across the county, which was £445,000, Lensman Scheme services to an additional £250,000 and improvements to public rights of way at £250,000. Despite the loss of the Rural Services Grant this year, this commitment will continue in 2025-26 to maintain delivery in these priority areas across the county. Expenditure for these schemes in future years will be subject to confirmation of future funding arrangements and the multi-year settlement and the review of the Council's Public Realm Services contract. There are significant pressures in the provision of mainstream home-to-school transport and SEND transportation services experienced in Herefordshire and nationally. The recent County Council network in November 24 highlights the financial pressures impacting on local authorities' home-to-school transport budgets, with growth in education, health and care plans for SEND students, and increases in more costly travel items such as individual taxis and passenger assistance intensifying the challenge. The provisional settlement notes that government intends to set out plans to reform the SEND system in further detail next year. Ahead of any substantial reform, the Council must manage increasing demand and cost pressures in transport services by identifying innovative strategies to influence demand using data to understand user requirements, maximise independence and reduce reliance on Council's transport services, and employ digital techniques to maximise opportunities, consolidate routes. Additional investment in a council-owned fleet of vehicles in the proposed capital programme for 2025-26 is planned to further mitigate this revenue budget pressure. This investment will seek to deliver maximum cost savings informed by revised route options and most efficient passenger utilisation. This initiative is one example whereby we're seeking to have capital programme activities which have a positive effect on the revenue budget. Corporate services are detailed at paragraph 78 of the report and show that the 2025-26 revenue budget reflects investment in the Corporate Services Directorate to support continued delivery of transformation across the Council, enabling innovation through technology and the use of digital tools to build a data and intelligence-led organisation. These improvements in the use of technology will support demand management, delivery efficiencies and inform decision-making across the Council's services and strategic priorities. Central is detailed at paragraph 79, with the central budget comprising financial transactions, minimum revenue provisions and other corporate budget items including pensions pension costs, costs in respect of the administration of housing benefit and council tax and business rate collections, together with income from the council's business rate pooling arrangement. This budget is informed by planned delivery of the council's capital programme and corresponding borrowing requirement. The 2024-25 revenue budget included a challenging savings target of £19.5 million, comprising of directorate savings of £11.6 million and council-wide savings of £7.9 million, across a range of proposals to transform services, reduce expenditure, increase opportunity for cost recovery, and review the size and shape of the organisation. The challenging savings targets set and the difficult decisions taken to deliver efficiencies in both services and the size and shape of the council form the basis of sustainable financial strategy, which is underpinned by robust financial management and continued expenditure controls, accuracy in forecasting, and effective collaboration between service and finance teams. The Council's financial planning and monitoring arrangements, which safeguard the financial sustainability of the Council, have been reviewed against National Audit Office criteria by external auditors. The Auditor's Annual Report, published in September 2024, confirms there are no significant weaknesses in any of our arrangements to ensure the Council manages risk to its financial stability. Work is underway to maximise delivery of the balance of the £5 million of savings assessed as at risk or to identify mitigations. The delivery of these savings in full and on time is critical to ensure the 2024-25 revenue outturn position is balanced and to prevent further pressure on future years' budgets. The only savings proposed in the 2025 revenue budget represent £3.9 million of savings in the Children and Young People's Directorate in Year 2 of the financial plan, as noted in paragraphs 46 to 52 of the report. And this target brings the total savings in the Directorate to £6.4 million across years 1 and 2 of the financial plan. Table 5 of the report details the mitigations of £3 million, which includes £1.4 million contribution from the Budget Resilience Reserve, or Contingency Reserve, in 2025-26 to bridge the gap of Year 2 savings identified in the Children and Young People's Directorate and as noted at paragraph 54 of the report. This application in 2025-26 is a result of revisions to planned activity and timings of savings, and this contribution will be repaid in years 3 and 4 of the revised plan period, alongside delivery of the balance of £2.3 million of savings. Transformation expenditure in the Corporate Service Directorate will be mitigated in 2025-26 through the application of £0.6 million of capital receipts. This application is permitted by statutory direction, and the Council is required to evidence compliance with qualifying condition to its external auditors. The qualifying expenditure will generate efficiencies, ongoing savings, and reductions in the cost of service delivery. The proposed application in 2025-26 represents modest use of this flexibility by the Council. The balance of mitigations represents increases in fees and charges of £0.5 million and realignment of directorate budgets, which total another £0.5 million to mitigate corresponding growth in 2025-26. Under the Local Audit and Accountability Act of 2014, the Council's external auditors are required to assess whether the Council has made proper arrangements under 3 areas, as defined by the National Audit Office: financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. For the 2023-24 financial year, Herefordshire Council was the first and only council in the country to receive an audit opinion on the financial statements and its value for money arrangements by the statutory deadline of 30 September 2024. The Auditor's Annual Report for 2023-24 notes that arrangements for identifying, developing, monitoring and reporting on savings are appropriate, and that the Council has used appropriate key assumptions together with sensitivity analysis when developing its 2024-25 budget. These arrangements, assessed by external audit, underpin the 2025-26 budget setting process to support the preparation of a realistic, balanced budget. Audit testing of the robustness of savings proposals included in the 2024-25 budget confirm a green rating in respect of the Council's plans to bridge its funding gap and to identify achievable savings. Auditors selected a sample of savings schemes across directorates and council-wide savings representing 14.6 million or 75% of the total 19.5 million savings, and the findings confirm that officers provided supporting working papers, including detailed calculations to support the figures, alongside evidence that plans have been developed through engagement between budget holders and service managers. Furthermore, the audit report provides valuable independent assurance that the Council has robust financial arrangements in place to identify all significant financial pressures and risks to financial resilience and support the sustainable delivery of services in accordance with strategic and directorate and statutory requirements. The key financial risks and mitigation actions are detailed in the table at paragraph 122 of the report, with all but one of the 7 risks being assessed as having a medium impact, with the single other one being high. The MTFS, published at Appendix A to this report, notes the uncertainty over funding arrangements over the medium-term period, with significant reforms planned by central government in 2025. Based on prudent estimates and assumptions, the MTFS highlights a balanced position for 25-26, a small surplus in 26-27, and a small gap between funding and expenditure requirements in 27-28 and 28-29. These future gaps represent 0.4% and 1.8% of the net budget requirement in each of those years, respectively, and it is expected that activity to deliver efficiencies to bridge this gap is easily and imminently achievable. Regarding the future uncertainty due to planned reforms, as information is made available and the impact on council funding can be quantified, Cabinet will consider whether it's appropriate to review the MTFS during 2025-26 in advance of the budget setting process for next year. Cabinet will propose the 2025-26 revenue budget for recommendation to Council at its meeting on the 23rd of January later this month. The report to Cabinet on the 23rd of January will include the medium-term financial strategy, the proposed savings plans of 25-26, proposed directorate-based budgets 25-26, Treasury management strategy, and reserve strategy and forecast balances to 31 March 2025. Finally, Council will meet to approve the 2025-26 revenue budget and supporting appendices at its meeting on the 7th of February 2025. Any changes to the budget proposed by Cabinet at the meeting of the 23rd of January 25 as a result of outstanding information noted above will be incorporated into the final budget to be considered by Council. In conclusion, I strongly recommend this draft budget and commend it to both to my Cabinet colleagues to approve both of its recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for a very comprehensive account of the way that the budget proposals have been put together, the considerations, and all of the things that you've had to bear in mind when doing the very large task of balancing a council budget. Right, so Cabinet members, right, we have some questions. First of all, Councillor Biggs.
Thank you, Leader. It's wonderful to go first, really, so I can wave lead the wave of support for Councillor Stoddart and Rachel and the team. I think when you need to just breathe for a moment and have another sip on that drink, Councillor Stoddart. You deserve it. Outstanding, I think, the amount of work that you guys have put in and is bringing this through. So we followed in after Christmas. I mean, the benefit of doing that, so we could consider properly the settlement that we were faced with. Gave us time to work on that, but that work was done during what normally is a Christmas holiday. So I just want to make sure we really recognise the effort that's gone into this. Congratulations on it, and I too support it. Just quick understanding for me, really. I'm pretty sure I've got it right, but it's my understanding that through the change to the RSG, the government's taken 7.1 million, which they promised to repurpose, and in redistributing it, we've only received less than 400k of it. That cut in the rural support grant of 6.7 million equates roughly to an enormous 30% of the non-social care funding we get from government. Is that true?
Yes, it is very much. As I explained earlier, it reflects central government's misunderstanding of rural county funding. The removal of that the removal of the 6.766 million whilst it has been made up with other bits of grant, still leaves us with fundamentally with a £2.5 million reduction in our central grant funding. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the RSN's information that they've put out that effectively only 2 counties have received primarily any funding. It does raise the question, where has that money gone to, which was previously rural funding? It's obviously gone to urban counties.
Thank you. Councillor Gandy and then Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. Deprivation in Herefordshire is real, and we all know it's real. 10% of our population live in deprived households, with at least 1 in 5 in the most deprived, lower super output areas. There are many examples of this: fuel poverty, rurality, and lack of access to services with poor or non-existent public transport. And there are many others. But probably the most telling is that the average Herefordshire earnings remain significantly lower than the average for both the West Midlands and England. Would Councillor Stoddard not agree that when the government spoke about putting more money into areas of deprivation, they either had no understanding of rural deprivation or they just chose to ignore it?
Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Councillor Gandy, for your very pertinent question. I believe that they have chosen, I wouldn't say they've chosen to ignore it, but they have looked at a different way of measuring social deprivation. What I can say is that Herefordshire Council has very, very strongly engaged with the RSN, the CCN, and also the Society of County Treasurers to put our impact that we have measured of this loss of the Rural Services Grant to them, and they will strongly take those bits forward to central government and also include that in the Fair Funding Review in March 2025. But you're quite right. Deprivation does exist in rural counties, and I think it has not been sufficiently covered within central government funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. And just for clarification, some acronyms there. The RSN is Rural Services Network, which is the body that campaigns for rural authorities, and CCN was the County Councils Network, who are also campaigning for rural authorities to ensure that there is fairer funding. So thank you for that clarification and that question, Councillor Gandy. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd like to associate myself with the comments made by Councillor Biggs, who expressed it very well. Congratulations to Councillor Stoddart, the 151 officer, and the team have done a remarkable job. It's never easy. It's very, very difficult, I think, when you get a local government settlement coming in just before Christmas and you've got to work over your holiday period. Very, very challenging. And I think it's really important for us all to understand the context of this work and how challenging it is for Herefordshire Council to balance the books, which is what this is. It's remarkable, brilliant, as well as invest in the things that our residents care about. So I think it's a really good piece of work. Just to return to the point that Councillor Stoddart was embarking on about the Rural Services Network and the redistribution of funding from the Rural Services Delivery Grant and Services Grant. The Rural Services Network have reported recently that this has widened the gap between urban and rural areas, with urban areas now benefiting from 41% more funding per capita than the rural areas. So, of the redistribution of the Rural Services Grant, what percentage has been retained by rural areas? And what has been the net loss to Herefordshire of this redistribution? And also, if Councillor Stoddart could give us a bit more detail about how are we going to represent our case to government in order to get a fair and sustainable funding settlement that reflects the needs and the costs of supplying services to Herefordshire?
Thank you very much, Councillor Swinglehurst. So first of all, what I can say is that analysis by the RSN shows that rural authorities, of which Durham and Cumbria were the two that we were aware of, received £15.3 million, and then there were another 7 million recovered from the recovery grant to some Shire district councils. I'm not sure the names. So effectively, of that, what did we get? The £110 million of the rural service delivery grant and the services grant of 87, which is a total of just under £200 million, £22 million has been recovered back to rural counties, so less than 10%. So 90% of the rural services grant has been retained by central government. Hence, perhaps identifying the 41% diversity between rural and urban authorities, as you mentioned. What work can we do? We are actively engaged. The S1 officer has engaged extensively with RSN, CCN, and also the Society of County Treasurers. All those comments have gone forward, and we will actively participate in the fair funding review in March. However, all we can do is put eloquently as best we can the rationale and the reasons behind, mentioning Councillor Gandhi's comments about rural deprivation occurs in rural areas, not just urban areas, making and trying to ensure that central government, which tends to represent urban areas, has an understanding of the challenges of delivering services across a rural area.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Leader. My concern is also regarding the council taxpayers in all this. If the government hadn't removed the 7.1 million for the rural support grant or services grant, would we have had to raise the council tax by 4.99%, or would we be able to remain constant with our proposed 3.99 as in the MTFS, which would have been equivalent roughly to the mandatory 2% for the adult social care and 1.99 council tax, which is more or less in line with inflation. Reflecting the aim of the administration, which, as I said, is to drive the costs down for Herefordshire, to limit as far as possible the burden upon the hard-working people of Herefordshire. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. Yes, I can confirm, as demonstrated in the MTFS, we had set in the MTFS a budget, a council tax increase plan of 3.99% for this 2025-26 budget. And in mid to late November, that was our intention. We sat around the cabinet, all of us, remember, around the table, discussing that very plan. However, on the 18th of December, to lose £7.1 million of funding effectively blew that consideration straight out the window. As I've said before, that 7.1 million was lost. We received 400k back, so we've got a net loss under rural services grant of 6.776 million pounds, which, when we then look at other central government grants that come in, we have ended up with a net loss of 2.5 million pounds. Options that we then looked at were to reduce services. However, what we do not wish to do is to do that, because that affects the good residents of Herefordshire, and that's not what we intend to doing. We have a very ambitious plan of delivering good, high-quality services across the county in an innovative way, and therefore what we looked to therefore do was take the harsh decision to therefore increase council tax for this year to 4.99%. But if you look in the MTFS, it shows again next year and the year after 3.99%. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Price.
Thank you, Leader. And Councillor Stoddart, my comments might not be in the order that I intended them to come out, because I've been making notes of you going on, and I've been working alongside you and the finance team over the period from the 19th of December to the 2nd of January, and since then you've put together your great report, and it is a great report. However, one might think of conspiracy theories, what agenda is going on at national level, because the reductions in rural support just are not sustainable. when you say that 84% of the budget is from our own resources, you just think about that a minute. A government settlement is only given us 16% of our revenue support for this county, which is probably the lowest it's ever been. You start to think what the Labour government really must hate rural life. Apart from all of that, and over the same period of time, the introduction of tractor taxes. I'm a farmer, and that's a big agenda in the rural area. So you've also said that the beneficiaries of some of this loss of income is the district councils. Guess what? In the devolution debate, we've just heard that all the district councils are going to be wiped out. So why would they give them more money now? This year is going to be the base for a multi-year settlement, and we are being screwed to the ground. There has to be an agenda coming forward that we are unaware of. So the question I have for you, which I did ask you this morning, I hope you've been able to find something out about this, is how do we as Herefordshire Council compare with other councils in terms of such a low level of support? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. You did ask the question at this morning's cabinet. We have had a look, but unfortunately, to get that information of how we compare will take me a little bit more time. I will give you my word that by next week we'll hopefully have some ideas. But you're perfectly right. Our funding of the £232 million of revenue budget is 84% from council and business rate tax income, and 16% from central government, which is very low. Thank you.
Coming back on a related point there, Councillor Stoddard, you mentioned two authorities that would benefit from what was the Rural Services Grant, but apart from them, nobody else who used to benefit from that grant is benefiting from it.
Thank you. Yes, so the RSN analysis shows that rural authorities received £22.8 million, or 3.8 of the available total of the Rural Services Grant and Services Grant, and therefore of that, two received payments, Durham and Cumbria, which totaled 15.3, and then the other 7 million was spread amongst some Shire district councils.
Okay.
So still very, very poor. And the question, as I explained in my introduction, is that therefore leaves nearly 96% of that rural services grant did not come to either the people of Herefordshire or other rural counties. And therefore the questions we have to be asking central government of is how is that equitable and how do they balance that? Because as my colleague Councillor Gandhi said, we have just as much deprivation in the rural areas as there is in urban. It may be a different way, it may be a different type of deprivation, but it is still deprivation. And therefore, the central government have therefore not followed through what they said they were going to do with the repurposing of those grants.
Thank you. And we have urban areas as well in Herefordshire that suffer from deprivation. Right. Okay. Right. If there are no other questions from Cabinet at this... Oh, Councillor Gandhi, sorry.
Thank you, Leader. I'm now going to be more parochial and talk about my own directorate. And I'd like to ask Councillor Stoddard, the government has promised to support the costs of NI and the national living wage that we face directly, although I note that that's only for 1 year and we have no idea what will happen in the multi-year settlement. You'll be aware that the council uses external providers where costs are increasing. For example, domiciliary care has gone up from 2023 to 2024 by 23%, and respite residential care has increased in that 12-month period by 50%. It is likely, due to a continuing ageing population, that the figure for 2025 will be even higher. Can you advise me as to how we are to fund this inevitable financial gap going forward, and are you confident it can be achieved?
Thank you, Councillor Gandhi. So you've asked me on a number of levels there. So we have the direct ONIC costings that we've assessed as being £1.5 million, and that has been factored in. We wait confirmation from central government in the final settlement, but we expect that to be done. You're referring also then to the indirect ONIC and national living wage. What we have done is we have factored that in as a demand-led area within not just your portfolio, but also into children and young people. So demand-led areas. We've factored in as best we can. So that's included in our allocation to each directorate. The final point you were then saying is how can we, what other provisions can we make? We've also, for demand-led, under the leader's direction, we've now, for the first time, established a contingency reserve where, as the demand-led services, children and adults, as you go through the year, if you have, through no fault of their own, a demand-led pressure, we will now be able to go to that fund to fund that as long as it's met all the various criteria. So we've put in place a number of steps. We've been proactive to this way rather than sitting reactively waiting for it to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. Right, any more questions from Cabinet at this stage? If not, I will invite group leaders to comment. Councillor Tillett, thank you, and thank you for stepping in for Councillor James, who can't be with us this afternoon.
That's quite all right. Strange to see my face and Terry's name underneath it, but these things happen. And I'm also grateful to you, Leader, for saving me the need to point out that deprivation in Herefordshire is not restricted exclusively to the rural areas. As a city ward member, that's quite right. Councillor Gandy has just apologised. But as a city member, I am only too conscious of serious problems of deprivation, both in areas of the city and indeed in some of the more urbanised bits of the market towns. I'll restrict my comments to three sections, and in time-honoured fashion, I will sandwich the less palatable bit in the middle. So I start with praise where praise is due. The sheer amount of work to deal with this on a timetable in the run-up to Christmas, it beggars belief why government felt that it was necessary, or indeed a reasonable burden, to put upon officers and staff. But the job has been done, and well done. And it's also worth bearing in mind that the situation and the budget that we are looking is at one that I suspect many of our near neighbours would be extraordinarily jealous. If you look across the border into Wales or to our north and to our east, most authorities are facing a situation much, much more dire than ours. And so that is credit to us all, and credit also must go in terms of the amount of savings that have been achieved. I think many of us in the opposition were extremely sceptical, I'd say with some justification that we were sceptical, about the degree of savings that could be achieved. But clearly there has been considerable success. There's still further to go, and it hasn't all been achieved yet, but again, credit where credit is due. Now perhaps slightly less praiseworthy. Much has been made, and of course you would, and you are right to do so, in terms of the grant withdrawal by the government and the fact that another £2.5 million has been shaved off, and this feeling that the rug has been pulled under our feet. But methinks the Conservative administration doth protest too much. Councillor Price may want to suggest that the Labour Party hates the rural economies. Well, cutting funding to Herefordshire Council did not start in July last year. Year after year after year, under the previous Conservative government, the funding to this council has been drastically slashed repeatedly. We have consistently, as long as I've been involved in local politics, have consistently been an underfunded county where our rural situation, our small pockets of population, our rural schools, our extensive road network has never been reflected in the funding. So it is lamentable, to put it mildly, that another 2.5 million has been cut in this year. But please let us not pretend that it all started in July last year. This has been a long-term problem under previous governments of underfunding this council and increasing the burden on council taxpayers as being almost the only way that we have to recover the money that has been so woefully withdrawn year after year after year by central government. My final point. I know one shouldn't read the comments in Facebook, but let's face it, they are addictive. I recently saw a comment on the proposed increase in council tax, which suggested, well, 90% of the council tax goes on pension provision for staff at Plough Lane. It's risible and clearly wrong. But I do notice, and it's a clear indication of the real problem of funding that all councils have, but particularly for us, that despite the savings by children's services, the increased pressure on adult services far outweighs that money that's been saved. Councillor Gandy has clearly, articulated the problems in terms of relying so much on outside services. And the fact is that the budgets for adults and children's services still represent 65% of the total budget. And the actual figure, if you add the two together, more is paid out by adults and children's services than the total proposed income from council tax. The rest is made up by other grants. But the fact is, to the people of Herefordshire who ask where their council tax is going, but the people in Herefordshire who ask where their council tax is going, the fact is every penny of what you pay is paying for services for vulnerable adults and children. And somehow we have to find the money for all the other services. But the fact is that is where council tax is going. So it is a hugely unenviable task. And I certainly thank Councillor Stoddard for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tillett. Thank you very much for that contribution. Councillor Toynbee, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think we had a few sort of irony klaxons, silent irony klaxons going off at this end during the recent conversation. The Green Group also hugely appreciates all the work that has gone into this. We know how much work it is, especially over a holiday period. And we're all very active in the process of the progress of this draft budget as it moves through our various processes. We agree with all colleagues who are indignant at the apparent lack of government understanding of the particular needs of rural counties. I'm sure we all agree on that, and we look forward to multi-year settlements from next year, but obviously that's no substitute for adequate funding. And we're very sad to see that austerity apparently is continuing. And as has been said, the loss of the Rural Services Grant pales into insignificance compared with the years and years and years of austerity that we had under the Conservatives and the impact that had on Herefordshire. I've just got two questions in relation to paragraph 76 of the covering report. Firstly, in relation to investment in a new operating model for our buses. Leader, at the last full council meeting, you responded enthusiastically to a proposal for a bus summit from the Vice Chair of Council, one of our Green Group, which would include a range of stakeholders. So it would be great if you could let us know where we are on that plan for a bus summit. And secondly, on the topic of much needed funding from central government, we would like to know what happened to the £102 million local transport fund that was allocated to Herefordshire last spring. Can we assume that since the general election it's been taken back by the Department for Transport? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. We'll pick those up in due course. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you, Leader. And Independence for Herefordshire, on behalf of, I'd like to add my thanks and congratulations to officers, to cabinet members for the work in putting this draft budget together. I know what's involved and the task is huge. So I wouldn't necessarily have used the Titanic metaphor, were it me, but there you go, each to their own. Independence for Herefordshire Independence for Herefordshire are when I'm not going to minimise the impact of losing the rural services grant support. Yes, this county has faced significant reductions in central government funding over many years, and it just means that the loss of that as a SOP, and SOP it was, when a lot of the funding reviews that were promised by the previous government were just kicked as cans down the road year after year. Hopefully there will be some improved circumstances with the fairer funding review, as it's termed, that's coming up. Let's hope it's big F, fair. But we have to wait on that. Nevertheless, losing that money where we are presently is significant, and particularly when you look at table 2 of the report, which shows where the grant funding does come from. Quite a lot of the grant funding that we have got has either stood still and or is ring-fenced as to what it can be spent on, which means that the loss of the Rural Services Support Grant will be disproportionately felt in some service areas. And I think my group is concerned that in the way that the figures are presented at the moment, and I recognise they are having to be presented at a high level, it is not possible truly to see where the losses in the Rural Services Grant actually fall against our service areas. My guess is that they fall disproportionately in Mr Cook's directorate, but I think it would be helpful and informative for members and for the public to be able to see where those costs actually fall. And I recognise, although we have got really significant what's being termed unfunded pressures in the way that the budget's being put together, we are actually funding that by the way that we are paying for it through council tax and other things. So it's not ultimately unfunded, but my guess is that those pressures in the way that they're presented in the report are themselves netted out, and that there are actually costs that are needing to be absorbed or dealt with through changes to the way we deliver services, or indeed real cuts somewhere in the system, and we just can't see it at the moment. Now, if that's the reality of the situation, I think, again, for members to understand that and for the public, my group would like to see that unnetted position in terms of what costs and loss of income from grants are having to be absorbed in service areas, and what are able to be funded in the way that the figures are being put together. And I think that's really just so that we can all make an informed decision when it comes to approving the budget, and also taking a view on whether those absorptions are truly deliverable and on what time scale in terms of their profile for delivery in the coming year. Because every month, as we know, that they're not delivered will be a cost that will fall to us to carry. So I think that's a plea from my group, and hopefully it will be a plea that will be listened to when we come to scrutinise the budget tomorrow. And I think that plea also goes for income, because there are service areas where it is possible to charge for services and where there is an income that is derived from various ways in which the council uses publicly owned assets, whether they be buildings or car parks or whatever. And again, those income sources are netted out in the way that the information is presented here. And I think it would be helpful and instructive to understand where that income is generated and where indeed we are having ambitions to grow that income, whether it's in the coming year or whether it's in the other years of the MTFS, in terms of how we, make our assets work harder for us where they are able to, and for the public, and indeed that we are using those assets wisely and well as the assets that are owned ultimately by the people of Herefordshire. I recognise that in the way that we're demonstrating, or we're publishing savings to be made, those are showing purely in the Children's Directorate, and that's fair. There was a significant adjustment to their budget last year, and that came with a multi-year transformation plan. And we recognise that that's been adjusted in terms of the profile of the delivery of those savings, and maybe that's a bit more realistic in terms of what's happening on the ground and the transformation journey for our children's services. But speaking of transformation, we have that as one leg of our county plan, and we're not seeing any savings showing in the way the figures are being presented here at the moment from transformation activity. And again, that I think would be something that it would be good for members and for members of the public to see, that the investment that's being made there is actually being realised through efficiencies, new ways of working, or indeed real savings. And I think, given that we recognise from the quarterly performance reports for in year that have been published so far for this year, the pace at which transformational savings are being realised are not at the rate that we had anticipated. And if those savings are being, from this year, that aren't being made, are being wound into a base budget and assumed as having been made as far as these figures are concerned, it would be helpful to understand that in the way that the figures are being presented. So I think the plea from my group is for an understanding of where costs are needing to be absorbed, and that's a different form of savings, where those are falling, and also where savings are really being made across the programme would be helpful for us to be able to see. One of the things that we notice, that apart from what we're expecting as the continuation of the council tax discount scheme when it comes to approval of the whole package of finance for this council next month, there are no targeted additional support funds for hard-up households to mitigate going for a maximum uplift in council tax. Now, under the previous administration, we did actually commit to targeting funds to the hardest hit households, in addition to funds that came from government and elsewhere through the council tax reduction scheme. I think we're disappointed that we can't see that in the way that the figures are presented at the moment, given that we are going for a full maximum uplift on council tax. We've got a significant income stream coming online with empty and second homes double council tax coming, and that was funding that was heralded over the last couple of years, and we've prepared for it. But the coming year will be the first year that we are actually looking to collect on that. And my group all supports and is grateful for the assurance that has been provided as to all the work that's gone into trying to make sure that we've got some really solid figures underpinning our anticipated income from that, but we still do see that as a significant risk as a first year income stream, and are just counselling a little bit of caution and maybe to understand the degree to which we are holding something in our back pocket on that, in terms of being measured in the assumptions that we're making about being able to get that money brand new out of people who maybe haven't been used to paying for it before. And with that, I'll leave it there, and no doubt we'll come back to this through scrutiny and a second bite at this when you approve the final budget. But thank you very much for all the effort that everybody's put in to get us as a council to where we are now.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, and thank you to all group leaders for their contributions. Made copious notes, as you can imagine I would do. I think the Star Prize goes to Councillor Tillett for quoting Shakespeare. That's got to be it. So always something that impresses me. So thank you, Councillor Tillett. I mean, sorry? Yeah. Yeah, I'll come back on that in a moment after I've made my points. Maybe tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. But anyway, no, I think the point that Cabinet, the point that Councillor Tillett makes about harping on about reduction of funding when local government funding has seen, reductions in revenue support grants. And I mean, I remember when I first joined the council, the revenue support grant was £64 million. And then that was in 2011, and then by 2019 it had gone down to 600,000. So that's a huge reduction, and I acknowledge that. But the art of ensuring that local government is adequately funded and supported by government is a difficult one, because you can't write a blank check, obviously. But at the same time, you've got to give them support where support is needed, required, and justified, and that's why we saw such great virtue in the Rural Services Grant that addressed as best as it could, given the imprecise nature of supporting local government, with all the structure that exists, that if you started from a certain place, you probably wouldn't start from where we are now. And then that's why devolution is looking to reorganise local government as a whole. But that Rural Services Grant, I think, was an acknowledgement by the previous governments that rural councils must be treated in a different way because of the challenges, the extra challenges that they have. And that Rural Services Grant was a due recognition of that. And also, I think it was the aspiration, although I can't quote the Shakespeare play where it was, but it was the aspiration of the previous government to get round to addressing fairer funding. We look to this government to address fairer funding, and we hope they do a very good job of addressing fairer funding, but the start doesn't look good when you see that the Rural Services Grant has been withdrawn. So I just make that point there in response to a very sound point that Councillor Tillett makes. It really is an eye-opening figure to relate that all of the council tax does go on one area of service that the council provides. But that it's right to do so because we need to support our vulnerable people, and so that's the right thing to do. But it just goes to show how much of a demand there is on those services, and when you see it in that context about all of that contribution going to looking after those vulnerable people, it really does highlight the burden that this council faces in looking after those vulnerable people, the burden in the cost, I should stress, not looking after vulnerable people, because that's always a worthwhile thing to do. So with regard to, there were two specific points that Councillor Toynbee made. One was about the bus summit, which I absolutely promised at the last council meeting. We've had a meeting with bus providers to tease out some of the issues. And so that was a good meeting, and the Enhanced Bus Partnership, they've had their meeting. And so that will help inform the position of those providers when we do have the bus summit. And I can confirm that the date for that bus summit will be confirmed this week. With regard to the writing to the Secretary of State for Transport with regard to the £102 million that was allocated from the previous government, you can imagine, can't you? We wrote early on to find out where that funding had got to. The initial answer we got was that they were waiting for a funding review. But we've now had a new Secretary of State for Transport, and so we're sending a letter to them this week, another task for this week, to ensure that we haven't forgotten that key critical issue about infrastructure investment in Herefordshire. So it's very much business as usual for us. Whether or not local government reorganisation takes a pace with devolution, we want to ensure that we're addressing all of the investment infrastructure that we need and those investment questions that we want government to answer. So Councillor Harvey has raised, as usual, you'd expect, having had the responsibility of putting forward a budget in subsequent years, has raised issues and points that I think would be really well served to have that discussion at scrutiny tomorrow, to tease out that extra information with regard to the budget and the impact of those reductions in revenue support. And I look forward to a really good, robust scrutiny meeting where we can tease out those issues. And in particular, the point about transformation of services and how that leads to improvement in being more cost efficient and more innovative and more cost effective. The only point I would point out to Cabinet really, and it's a point for scrutiny tomorrow, is that in the past there has been talk about extra help for people who find themselves in difficult financial situations. And that was a point that Councillor Harvey has made in previous council meetings. But we have checked, and we're not clear on when that extra support was going to be delivered by the last administration. And so I think that point needs to get teased out at the scrutiny meeting tomorrow, and also to make the point that we have quite a comprehensive raft of measures to address those who find themselves with financial hardship. There is quite a robust package there in place. So the question would be, seeing as we have that in place and people benefit from that service, what's the ask of more of that, seeing as we're already doing a comprehensive range of support. But as I say, I think that would be a useful discussion to have in scrutiny. Not that I'm preempting what scrutiny should talk about, but that's up to scrutiny. But it may be a good forum in which to bottom that out, seeing as Cabinet isn't really the point of the place where you can scrutinise that type of point. So that's Cabinet, my thoughts on the points that have been raised. But Councillor Stoddart, did you want to come in at any point?
Yes, there's one thing I would like to just come back to. You've very adequately addressed the other points, but one thing I would like to say to Councillor Harvey is I can give you my assurance there are no hidden cost savings or cuts anywhere in this budget. I'll repeat it again, there are no hidden cost savings or cuts in this revenue budget.
Okay, so Cabinet members, does any... Oh, Councillor Price?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I come back to Councillor Tillett's remarks. Absolutely agree with you. I just felt that now there is a different emphasis on lack of rural funding, not just this council. The fact that we have had reductions for many years and in a previous government, we should have made more fuss about it up the chain. From my own perspective, I spent 39 years as a parish councillor before I was motivated to think I could do more good if I was a county councillor. And I'm in my fourth term as a cabinet member in this council. And I'm not motivated to go further up the chain, but I can certainly be motivated to complain about rural support, not just for this council. But you took it slightly out of context. If I was to say about deprivation in this county, we have an organisation called This Is Farming Minds, of which many of you will know about. And they have to deal with the stress involved in agriculture. And that stress and deprivation, in a dictionary definition, might put miles apart, but one leads to the other. And in a rural county that has been hit by many, many cuts, my reference was to the wider picture, not just this council. But I will be shouting for the rural members of this council, and being a Golden Valley member, I don't have a market town or a city. I have to represent agriculture and those people that live within that area. I would just like to point out that I do find it very frustrating in the fact that our new SOS Secretary of State for Transport, Heidi Alexander, happens to have said, I don't know why I've got this job because I know nothing about infrastructure. And, you know, these are the sort of things I pick up on, and I, through the system, put my comments forward. What I was saying is that we are short of funding. There is a reason why we're short of funding, because that funding has been cut from us. So in that context, I hope you will all support this budget, because it is looking at the basics of how this county works, who we represent, and this is the best we can do with the figures that we've got. So I take your points on board, and I accept the fact that you might be partly right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have a proposal. Right, Chairman's discretion. I'll allow Councillor Proctor to make a point.
Just following on from the point you made about leaning into tomorrow's scrutiny. Yeah, I think we have seen some of the topics that might be discussed tomorrow. I just wanted to kind of emphasise that scrutiny is not the only place where Cabinet can have these sorts of conversations, and I encourage Cabinet to scrutinise itself as well as just relying on scrutiny committees to do that task. So,
thank you, Councillor Proctor. I can assure you that happens every day. Right.
Councillor, I can confirm that I would equate it almost to have been gone through tactical questioning for the last 6 weeks. So rest assured that the Cabinet have scrutinised us very, very carefully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll summarise by saying, as I say, officers and Councillor Stoddart, the finance team, have been working all over Christmas and New Year non-stop. There's been a lot of planning here. We were hopeful of being in the right situation with regard to minimising council increases to 3.99%, but the changing position that we were presented with by the end of December meant that we were no longer having the luxury of being in that position. So given the fact that we need to balance the budget, we've got a reduction in revenue support, but we do still have that very ambitious plan to deliver the best for Herefordshire residents. This is the budget that we think we need to put forward for debate, for scrutiny, for future Cabinet meetings, and for the Council meeting on the 7th of February for its full debate there. And after that, we will have also been told about what the final settlement will be from government, if anything. So we will have to wait and see on that particular point. But all things considered and the debate that has ensued, Councillor Stoddart, is it your view that you will propose this recommendation? 2 recommendations, sorry. I do. Okay, I will second that. All Cabinet members in favour? Thank you very much. So we now move on to the next item of Cabinet agenda, which is agenda item 8, the capital investment budget and capital strategy update. This is to recommend to Council for approval a revised capital investment budget and capital strategy for 2025-2026 onwards. The item begins on page 77 of the agenda pack, and I would like to ask Councillor Stoddart to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks to recommend to Cabinet the draft 2025-26 capital investment budget together with the draft capital strategy for 25-26 onwards. The capital programme reflects capital investment which generates benefit to the county for a period in excess of 1 year. You will recall that at full council on the 6th of December, which included the current capital programme, as included in this report, as the base capital programme, we debated an amendment for a number of IT projects which were then subsequently approved. The approved capital programme is provided at Appendix B to this report as at the end of December 2024. The reprofiling of the capital spend was carried out in Q2 in line with external audit recommendations and reported separately to Cabinet. Forecasting against budget is reported to Cabinet in the quarterly performance report, which includes an up-to-date forecast of the timing of capital spend, and the Q3 forecast will be reported at the February meeting. The additional grants which we've received are listed at the bottom of Appendix B and have all been approved by the Chief Finance Officer in year. The proposed capital programme for 2025-26 presents an ambitious programme of capital investment which is aligned to the priorities of the Council plan across people, place, growth and transformation. The proposed additions for 25-26 represent projects which will mitigate key revenue budget pressures, improve the use of technology to deliver efficiencies and innovation in services to residents, deliver new infrastructure to support future growth for housing and businesses, encourage active lifestyles for children and young people through a £1 million investment in play areas, develop cultural and community spaces for residents and visitors, and strengthen resilience and reduce the impact of flooding with investment of £2 million, improve road safety across the county and provide continued investment in the county's road network. All proposals are included in Appendix A, along with outlined strategic business cases at Appendix E. Appendix A provides details of the proposed additions to the programme that have been identified and the impact of approving these additions. 18 capital investment budget proposals totalling £58.12 million have been identified to be funded by prudential borrowing, capital receipt reserve and revenue reserves. To ensure that we utilise the Levelling Up Fund grant as early as possible and use council match funding last, the Hereford City Transport Package for the Transport Hub will increase the grant funding by £2.5 million and reduce the amount of council borrowing required. This will be offset by a reduction of £2.5 million of grant funding for Lough North projects and increase of council borrowing. An informal review of all prospective capital funding requests has been completed to ensure the financial impact of the funding requests are taken account of in the medium-term financial strategy. As part of the 2016-2017 local government finance settlement, the government announced new flexibilities allowing local authorities to use capital receipts to fund transformation expenditure. This guidance was extended and updated in 24-25 to extend the freedom of local authorities to use eligible capital receipts up to 2029-30 to help fund the revenue costs of transformation and release savings. The direction permits authorities to use the proceeds from asset sales to fund the revenue costs of projects that will deliver ongoing savings, reduce costs, increase revenue or support a more efficient provision of services. The Council intends to take advantage of this flexibility to support the financing of qualifying expenditure to deliver transformation change programmes across the organisation. Therefore, £0.6 million in 24-25 and £0.6 million in 25-26 revenue transformation works will be funded from the use of capital receipts reserve. I would also like to remind you all that inclusion in the capital programme is not approval to proceed. Each project will be subject to its own governance. A full business case will be presented for approval to Cabinet where required, and compliance with the Council's contract procedure rules as applicable. The capital strategy has been developed in accordance with SIPFA guidelines. The purpose of the capital strategy is to tell a story that gives a clear and concise view of how the Council determines its priorities for capital investment, decides how much it can afford to borrow, and sets its risk appetite. It should not duplicate other more detailed policies, procedures and plans, but instead sit above these and reference these to allow those seeking more detail to know where to find it. That said, it should provide sufficient detail so that it provides an accessible single source for the reader. The strategy is included at Appendix D to this report and in line with the guidance requires full Council approval. The Council is committed to bringing forward the first phase of the Western Bypass, aiming to be on site to deliver the current scheme to the south of the city in 2026. Development work on the Southern Link Road is being taken forward at pace. Once completed, this new bypass connection for the A49 from the south to the north of the city will deliver the Western Growth Corridor, creating over 10,000 new homes and over 300 acres of new employment land. This project, previously included as the Southern Link Road, has been renamed in the capital programme to Hereford Western Bypass Phase 1, and the increase in capital budget is proposed to be funded from borrowing, although grants will be sought to reduce the amount of borrowing required. Responding to social and affordable housing needs across the county remains a high priority for the Council. The acquisition for housing provision, £5 million, which was added to the capital programme in July 2024, is already being used to bring forward schemes to deliver social housing to meet the county's urgent need for provision, provide better homes for those in need, and reduce dependency on high-cost temporary accommodation. This includes the acquisition of the Buttercross building in Leominster in November 24, and we're finalising the acquisition of a building in Hereford. The acquisition fund assumes funding through borrowing, repaid through income from housing benefit, and the reduced cost of temporary accommodation. Due to the lead times involved in identifying sites that become available, undertaking due diligence, obtaining planning, vacant possession and procurement, the current £5 million of funding is deemed adequate for 2025-26. However, should other opportunities come forward earlier than anticipated, we will seek Council approval to add additional borrowing to the current capital programme allocation in year. To meet the strategic needs for medium to long-term affordable housing solutions across the county, the Council is exploring options to deliver larger schemes in key locations, and work is underway to review best practice options through engagement with developers and registered providers. Over the course of 2025-26, the future route to delivery will be finalised, working with the Cross-Party Housing Working Group to inform the capital programme requirements for 2026-27 and beyond. The proposed additions at Appendix A total £58.12 million over the next 4 years. This is to be financed from £56.12 million of prudential borrowing, of which £45.72 million is in addition to the amount available through current levels of corporate funded borrowing. £1 million is to be funded from the use of the Capital Receipts Reserve, and £1 million from the Revenue Reserve specific for the use at College Road campus. Where projects are in the capital programme, but they depend on grant, if the grant request is not successful, then the full project, including any match funding, will be removed unless a revised project is approved within the funding allocations. The 18 projects that we're looking to fund include the play area investment of £1 million, the IT system upgrades and server replacements of £500,000, the public realm services fleet of £1.54 million, public realm mobilisation of £450,000, property investments in care homes phase 2 of £604,000, the Estates Building Improvement Programme 2025-27 of £4.304 million, building works from the 2022 condition surveys of £1.715 million, Yeza Brook £260,000, school route planning software £50,000, resurfacing Herefordshire highways, £5 million, road safety schemes of £3 million, the highways infrastructure investment of £5 million, the city and market town public realm investment of £1.2 million, excuse me, CCTV equipment upgrades of £89,000, the Shah Hall refurbishment phase 2 of £1 million, the council school transport fleet of £350,000, Herefordshire flood risk mitigation of just over £2 million, and lastly, the Hereford Western Bypass phase 1 of £30 million. The corporate revenue implications of securing this new borrowing is included in the current medium-term financial strategy and treasury management strategy, which has always allowed for £6.7 million of new prudential borrowing per annum over the strategy period. The additional borrowing requirement is reflected in an update to the treasury management strategy, as shown in the report appearing elsewhere on the Cabinet's agenda today, with actual borrowing being secured as cash funding is required at the optimal interest rate available at that time. The table at para 24 reflects borrowing against above the annual funding each year. This will have an impact on future revenue budgets when the repayments have to be made. And these additional costs are reflected in the table at para 25, which is calculated over a 40-year period, and therefore £2.2 million repayments will continue until fully repaid. Individual capital scheme resourcing implications will be detailed in the approval to proceed decision, and Appendix E contains the outline strategic business case for each of the 18 projects I mentioned earlier. Whilst this budget setting document will not detail specific environmental impacts, considerations will always be made in minimising waste and resources use in line with the Council's environment policy. An initial environmental assessment has been included in the outline strategic business case that will be reviewed at scrutiny, and these will be developed and scoped for each project when they seek approval to spend and a separate governance decision. For all capital projects, monthly budget control meetings give assurance on the robustness of budget control and monitor to highlight key risks and to identify any mitigation to reduce the impact of pressures on the Council's overall position through phasing of spend, identifying and secure scheme changes for alternate funding sources. Capital projects inherently give rise to risks in their delivery, both in time and budget. Individual scheme reporting and associated project boards exist to mitigate these risks. The proposed additions have been reviewed in relation to risks both in deliverability, costs, impact, and associated scheme interdependencies. The individual scheme details of the risk will be provided as individual schemes progress to approval to deliver. I fully endorse this report and strongly believe that this ambitious capital programme will deliver on this Conservative-led administration's commitment to the people of Herefordshire, whilst clearly aligned with the Council plan and its vision of delivering the best for Herefordshire in everything we do. I have no hesitation in commending its 3 recommendations to Cabinet for their approval. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Councillor Stoddard, for a comprehensive assessment of the proposal. Any Cabinet members wishing to make any points, queries? Councillor Biggs.
There we are, go first again. Congratulations again, Councillor Stoddard, in bringing this through. There's an enormous amount of work, and making all this type make sense is well beyond me. Thankfully, it's within your capability. I just want to say one thing really about this before we go to with group leaders and others. It's worthwhile reminding ourselves, I think, that it's not really a Conservative budget, neither of them are, and it's not really this administration budget, it's a council budget, because we can't put this through, we can't push this through on our own with just our hands being raised and hope we can just dominate those things. It just isn't the case. So I'm really pleased to look at this and the way you've approached so much of it and the revenue budget, and hope that everybody across the floor can get behind this and vote it through for the good of Herefordshire, because it's not a Conservative budget, it's not this administration's budget, it's our council budget that we're discussing here. That's all I was, and that's why it's thanks to you for doing such a great job of it, Peter.
Thank you for those comments. Any other Cabinet member wishing to speak? Okay, and come back to Cabinet members. Go to group leaders next. Councillor Tillett, first off the blocks again.
Absolutely. No, I will I will avoid Shakespeare unless it happens to just pop into my mind, unplanned. Obviously, you know, there's a lot in this. The devil, as always, is in the detail, but there is also much in here that the Lib Dems will be happy to support, and indeed, it reflects some of our priorities that we have made clear to the administration. I think it would be naive not to put at the top of that list the clear and very, very certain commitment to the first phase of the Western Bypass. The fact is that parties supporting the Western Bypass represent the majority in the council chamber. It remains, I know, still a divisive issue, but a divisive issue in which the majority of the population are for it. I think it's very important for all sorts of practical and logistical reasons that the council makes it clear that it is fully committed to a Western Bypass. Much of the debate over many decades has been obfuscated, has been made wishy-washy and unclear by changes of minds and lack of certainty. And whilst nothing in this life is certain other than death and taxes, this is as clear a statement of the council's intent as can possibly be made, and that is very important, particularly for a large number of the third parties involved in this project. Another one of the Lib Dem priorities has always been about the need for increased housing, social housing, affordable housing. I think there is quite clear water between us and others on how that might be provided, and much of that will still yet need to be worked out. But the fact that there is such a clear commitment, and in some cases with regard to the property in Leinster and in Hereford, actual movement on that is really encouraging, and clearly that as one example of revenue, of capital investment, easing pressures on revenue in subsequent years is just, it would seem to me, just common basic sense. Good old-fashioned housekeeping. You know, you don't keep repairing something, if necessary you replace it, and then it will do you good for many years, and so on. So that is also good to see. The other, of course, big public priority has always been our roads in terms of their condition of the roads and the safety and the state of them, and that again is well reflected in this budget. I'm also pleased, of course, to see such a significant investment in play area upgrades. These are important facilities in all our communities, and inevitably the standard and the quality of some of them has drifted. I know this is part of a bigger scheme to look at then offloading them onto parish councils and so on. Well, good luck with that. We'll see how that works, but the fact that there is this clear commitment to upgrade play areas is to be welcomed. And with that, I will pass to the next person. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Tillett. Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the Green Group also welcomes investment in social and affordable housing. And I note, you know, we were looking at the investment and whether it be adequate enough. So it's interesting to hear what Councillor Stoddart just said about if the initial 5 million proves not to be adequate, then we can do something about that. So that is reassuring. We also note the flexibility, the new rules about flexibility around the use of capital receipts. I feel it's sort of, it makes me a little bit nervous because it's the sort of thing that we shouldn't have to do. I think it is sort of reflecting of the state of local government finance. But anyway, we're going to keep an eye on that. So we just have two questions, really. One related to Appendix D and the other one Appendix E. On Appendix D, the Council's capital strategy, this states that the disposal of surplus assets is critical to deliver the Council's capital strategy. And it also states that assets should only be held that meet the objectives of the council. We all have a responsibility to Herefordshire to preserve assets on behalf of the people so that land, property and other assets are maintained in public hands. And one of our stated objectives is the future prosperity of the county, which I think some people would argue is incompatible with selling off the family silver. Assets are wealth, and in the case of council assets, wealth that we hold on behalf of Herefordshire. And one person's surplus assets are another person's long-term resilience. So our question is, how does Cabinet weigh up the need for instant cash that can only be used once with our responsibility to our heritage, our legacy and our future generations? And a comment on Appendix E. We noticed right at the end of the business case for phase one right at the end of Appendix E and right at the end of the business case for phase one of the bypass, there's some interesting paragraphs about risks. It may be that external funding is not forthcoming for phase one of the bypass, and therefore the council will be required to fully fund the project. And finally, a full business case for phase one to demonstrate that it represents value for money in its own right, i.e. not as part of a bypass project, but in its own right, will be developed prior to spending commitments on construction. So it's very interesting to see those, and we'll be keeping a close eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee, for the question and the comments and reflections. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. In broad terms, we welcome the continued significant investment that this council is planning on making through its capital programme. We also welcome the surfacing of Plan B for the funding of the Southern Link Road. As a group, we don't acknowledge that this is the first phase of a bypass, the case for which has not been fully made. But at least it's there and it's out there for all to see that it will be, as it stands, Herefordshire people's money that will be used to deliver this road. And we hope and expect that the same rigorous value for money standards are applied to the business case that Department of Transport and the Green Book would require of any investment of this scale. And the detail of that's for another day. As a group, we welcome and consider it overdue investment in play areas. That's an important community asset and facility for people living in the very many urban developments that have come forward with play areas that the council has had responsibility for. I think as a group we think it is reasonable to open discussions about whether there is the opportunity to share the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of those in the future, not necessarily purely with parish councils, but it's a timely conversation to have. But obviously we need to get them in tip-top condition in order to have any reasonable conversation about how they're looked after in the future. We note that there is further investment being made in terms of funded by borrowing on resurfacing Herefordshire highways. Historically, there have been significant investments that this council has made under previous administrations in the road network. However, those investments have been borrowed on timescales that do not match the timeframes over which the investments have existed, in that the work that's been done has deteriorated before the original borrowing has been paid off. And as a group, we would like to seek some assurance that if borrowing is going to be made to undertake such works, that the time period over which the money is borrowed matches the length of time that the asset will be in existence before it effectively needs to be recreated all over again, and would look to our finance team and others to make sure that that rigour is applied to the investment cases that are made. Broadly speaking, I think we are concerned that we put forward really ambitious capital programmes which we then fail to deliver on at the pace that we state is our intention, and that perhaps maybe being slightly more measured in our ambition and having a slightly different delivery profile would match our ability to deliver, and it would also more realistically phase the borrowing that we would be expecting to undertake, rather than continually having to adjust our expectations in year. So we would counsel that there is maybe a more realistic view taken of the delivery profile. And as regards the proposed capital strategy, we don't actually acknowledge that it is a strategy, it's a delivery plan for the existing programme. And if it were a strategy, then it would be recognising that there was work to be done in order to populate the out years, and the appropriate investment would be being made in the funds and resources in order to develop the business cases to enable those out years to become populated with new programmes. And we would also be stating clearly what the investments are that need to be made to meet our 50-year economic vision for the county, and the longer term views and plans that we have as a council. So it's a good start, always in favour of delivery plans. It's not a strategy, but we're thoroughly in favour of a strategy and would support developing one.
Thank you for that, for those comments, Councillor Harvey, and for your insights as well, and recommendations and counsel. So earlier on, Cabinet, we heard a query about the Annex D, about the capital strategy and the disposal of assets and the safeguards and measures there are with regard to that issue. And then there was an observation about the business case for the phase 1 of the bypass. But if we can go to the capital strategy disposal point that was made. Councillor Stoddart, do you have any comment to make to Cabinet on that point?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I can convene that. I can state that we'll continue to review our asset base in line with our council priorities, and it's certainly not our intention to dispose of any. I very much agree with Councillor Toynbee. We will not be looking to dispose of any assets unless there's a hard business case to do so. We certainly won't be getting rid of the selling off the silver.
No, okay. More like polishing it rather than selling it. Right, okay, thank you. And Councillor Tillett made lots of comments about some of the key aspects of the capital strategy, no less the clear indication that this capital strategy and the direction that we really want to go in is to establish the capital allocation for delivery of the first phase of the Western Bypass, and also that very important housing provision that through the help of a motion at full council previously the year gone by, and the collective will of this council to really address the housing issues that we face, that we have a really strategic joined up approach that will, I think, be multifaceted in its approach to providing housing for residents in particular situations. So that I think is a really important strategy. So I thank Councillor Tillett for drawing that out, as well as all of the other investment that is proposed. With regards to interested to know Cabinet's view from the point that was raised by Councillor Harvey about the delivery of capital projects and their phasing of them, because I think we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. If we don't deliver it at pace, then there's criticism that these things should have happened to progress Herefordshire's fortunes. But at the same time, it's just to make sure that we deliver that in a way that is aware of the financial implications. So, Councillor Stoddard, do you have any comments for the Cabinet on that point?
Yes, Leader, thank you very much. I think it was at the last Scrutiny Management Board we delivered a comment that, and I haven't got the figure to hand, but we're delivering approximately 50% more projects this financial year than the previous year. I think it was around about £60 million worth rather than the 30 before. Is that correct, Rachel? Yeah.
Anyway, as I said earlier in the revenue section on the last agenda item, this matter will be before scrutiny, a further Cabinet meeting and full council on the 7th of February. So I look forward to all of that input. If there are no further comments from Cabinet or anyone else, then we have three recommendations with regard to the capital programme. Councillor Stoddard, you're going to propose. I'm happy to second the proposal. Cabinet members, all in favour of those three recommendations? Thank you very much. Well, agenda item 9 is to close the meeting, and I would just like to thank everyone for their contributions this afternoon in determining a discussion that is absolutely crucial for Herefordshire Council and for Herefordshire's future in terms of the services it provides and the ambitions that we all have. And so I'd like to close the meeting, noting that on the next meeting of Cabinet will be the 23rd of January at 2:30 p.m. So I'll formally close the meeting, and for all members of the public who are in the audience, please make sure that you leave the building as promptly as possible and do not leave your personal possessions behind. Thank you. Safe journey home, everyone, and can I please ask that the live